right, welcome everybody. Today with us, Peter Vermes, New Jersey native, grew up in Delran, New Jersey, Rutgers University, professionally soccer player in Hungary, Holland, and Spain, played in the MLS for the Metro Stars, Colorado Rapids, Sporting Kansas City. In 2009, he moved on as the head coach of Sporting Kansas City, and he's still the head coach, longest standing head coach in the MLS. He's a Hall of Famer and a coach that I respect dearly. Has done a fantastic job in representing all of New Jersey on all levels. Welcome, Peter Vermes.
It's my pleasure to be here, James.
Awesome, man. So I want to first of all get back to you as a youngster here in Delran. Your parents migrated from Hungary straight off the boat, I'm guessing. Let me ask you, you speak fluent Hungarian?
I do. I would say that I understand everything, but the fact that I don't get a chance to practice it on a regular basis probably puts me at a little bit of a deficit, but I can understand everything. And if I go back there and spend a day, it all comes back, completely. But I also have a few players on my team that are Hungarian. So once in a while, I kind of keep it going there as well.
Awesome, man. So tell me, your dad was a professional, I read. Tell us about the benefits of having somebody that had been there. And I know through the Hungarian system, technical execution was a big part, and repetition. Was that kind of how you grew up?
So it's interesting. It's a really interesting question. So my father, yes, he was a professional soccer player. What I would say is that as in the early years, he didn't coach me. He coached my other two brothers. And just by accident, he coached my team, one of my teams. Something happened. I can't remember. I was a little kid, but all of a sudden he winds up taking the team. And I'm not even sure if he really wanted to coach me at all. But the thing I'd say that is interesting is my oldest brother was a really good player. I have another brother who's in between us. He was the destroyer on the field, right? He used to crush guys. And so my oldest brother, I think, probably could have been a professional soccer player if he would have stayed with it. He played the old Libero system, right? He was the sweeper in the back is what he was.
Yep.
Really smart, read the game, excellent in the air, tremendous tackler of the ball. But there's a big difference between the two of us. The more my dad pushed him, the less he wanted to play the game. And for me, the more my dad pushed me, I couldn't get enough of it. And that's why I think that so much of anything has to do with the individual person and what their internal drive is. And so for me, it wasn't as much that my father would tell me to go do things. It was what he told me. So I would go out and train. He didn't have to tell me to go out and train. I would go do that myself. But you bring up a great point, and that is the technical aspects of the Hungarians. They were known as the Brazilians of Europe for years, right, for decades. And so as a young kid, the one thing my father would say to me is like, look, you got to be a balanced player. You got to be able to play with your left and your right. You got to be able to head the ball. You got to be able to receive the ball with both feet. You got to be able to do these things that you're a balanced player. And so I really, really took a strong concentration on making sure that technically I could do the things that a player needed to do to get to each level.
Nice. And growing up in Delran, you obviously must have played a ton with your brothers, with your friends in the neighborhood. What about the impact of just playing with freedom and just being able to express yourself and try things when no one was watching?
Yeah, I think that's what's lost, right, in today's player. And it's unfortunate because so much of it has to do with culture as well. When parents don't necessarily let their kids go away from their house because they have play dates and all these other things, and it's a safety thing, and that's how people look at it, it's also constricted the way I think kids grow up culturally. So the example would be it's one thing is to be able to play games and not have a coach and you figure things out. It's another thing also to be able to argue, to fight, to compete. And those things are lost. To fight to win. Hey, that ball was out. No, it wasn't out. Yeah, it was out. Like that type of thing. Oh, you know what? I'm just going to throw it in and play anyway. And those things I think are what really is lost with players today. And so having free play, to be able to organize your own team, hey, you know what? Maybe you get picked on the better team, or maybe you don't. Then you have to find a way to beat the other team and say, yeah, maybe next time you pick me. Those are the things I think are missing, which I was fortunate enough to grow up with. And I learned a lot by playing against a lot of older players, older guys than I was. And frankly, that helps you not just from a physical perspective, but helps you from a mental point of view.
Yeah, that's great stuff. Well said there. I agree that those little things, man, that you just mentioned that aren't even actual field related, they're big. So what about practicing on your own? Were you the type that just got the ball, banged the ball up against the wall? Imagine you were in a World Cup final and you had people around you and bending shots and taking people on?
Honestly, I trained all the time. And I don't, that's not me just making that up. I trained every day, but I didn't need anybody to tell me. I can remember I had three bushes in my backyard, and they were separated and they were outlined by railroad ties, right? And that used to be my slalom for dribbling the ball. I had, I had a fence in my backyard, and on both sides, basically I had a clear path to each side of the fence, and I had a goal picked out on each side, and I would just smack the ball into those areas. As I got a little bit older, I would come home from school. I would immediately grab my ball. And what's funny is I didn't even take a drink with me. That's what's crazy is, how we have water bottles, never even took a drink. I used to just take the ball, and I used to run about 2-3 blocks from my house to a church that had grass area. And I would go there and had a goal out in the back. And I would just go there, again, dribble through trees for my slalom, shoot on goal. I mean, I would do that until it turned dark, and then I would find my way home. And I would do that every single day. And as I got older, those things changed in a different way. I had 2 friends I used to pay when I was in high school. I would say, I'd take you guys on the weekend to the movie theater if you guys play me 2 against 1. And I would use it as a opportunity, not only to work on my skills, but the game was set up, and that is, there was no out of bounds. So wherever the ball went, whoever got to it first, it was their ball. So it was a conditioning thing. So even if you take a shot and you miss, if you go and get it, it's your ball and you get it. So I would do that with those guys. And it was just a way of competing and getting myself fit and just working at my craft.
That's great. And you obviously got to a point where you were so good. You played soccer at Rutgers, and then you had the confidence to try your luck overseas, and you went straight to Hungary. How was that experience, and were you shocked?
Yeah, well, it's interesting how everything works, right? So I was playing with the Olympic team, and we played in a tournament in France, in Lille, France. And I was prior to the Olympics in '88, and I went there. We had a couple game tournament, and we were in final, and we won 2-1. And I played at that time as a center forward, and I scored the game winner. So I'm walking off the field, and this guy says in Hungarian, he says, my last name in Hungarian is Vermes, and he says Vermes, but he says in Hungarian, he's like, Vermes, beszélsz magyarul? And he said, do you speak Hungarian? And I said, yeah. And he said, hey, can I talk to you? I said, hey, look, I'm going to go take a shower. When I come out, I'll talk to you. It's interesting, especially back then. Like, it's amazing how people are all over the stadium and they could get to you. Like today, you can't do that. So this guy, whatever, I come out, I start talking to the guy. He's an agent. He's Hungarian. He lives in Belgium. He says to me, he's like, look, I'd love to bring you over to Europe. I think there would be a couple of teams in Belgium that would be really interested in you. And one of them was Standard Liège. So I said, yeah, I'd love to come over. So he says, well, before we do that, after the Olympics, what I'll do is I'll bring you to Hungary for a couple of weeks, and then just kind of get you up to the speed and make sure that you're fit, ready to go. And then we'll go over there and we'll train and try out with them. Great. Go to Hungary, go to a club that he knows, which is Roberto and Jur. And we go out to lunch, and we talk with the sporting director, the president, and the coach of the team, and say, hey, can I come over and train with you? And they thought, hey, this was going to be, my agent was selling it as a big marketing deal. American Hungarian, they were calling me the Hungarian American, coming back and training with a team over there. Okay, great. Honest to God, first day, first training, I come in, we go right into the stadium, and we play a mock scrimmage, the reserve team against the first team, and I'm on the reserve team. And no lie, 7, 8 minutes into the game, not one guy's passed me the ball. Nobody would give me the ball. Because here I am coming from the outside trying to take somebody's job. That's the way they're perceiving it. They don't know why I'm there. So imagine a midfielder on my team gets the ball, and I got to go up and shoulder him off the ball and steal the ball from him at midfield. And I just went on a dribble and spree, went down the field, hit a shot, and hit the crossbar. And now all of a sudden, the guy started playing me the ball. Well, the first team scores. We kick off. Within 2 minutes, I score, tie the game up. We come back to kick off. The coach says stop, and he tells me to trade pennies with the other forward on the other team. So I put that on. Within 5 minutes, I score another goal. They called the game. We probably played about 20 minutes. They called the game. We go inside. I'm getting a shower. Guy walks in and says, hey, you need to come out here. The sporting director and the coach want to talk to you. And it's my agent. So okay, I'm like, okay, what are we going to talk about? So I go out there, whatever, and they say, hey, we want to sign you. And so I just thought it would probably be better for me to stay in Hungary. I know the language. I know the culture. Probably was the best bet for me right off the bat with something real in hand, as opposed to going somewhere and having to try out. So I did that for a year, and that's how I got bought from the Holland team to go to Hungary.
Oh, okay. And then you went to the Dutch.
Yeah.
How was that? A lot more
unbelievable experience. Yeah. So what it was is that I had a great coach. His name was Leo Stateman. He was a fantastic coach. I mean, I mean, you got to think about it. I'm playing against Ajax. Ajax had Bergkamp, the De Boer brothers, Witske, Johnny van Skip. Gosh, I mean, I could keep going. I mean, they had every player you could think of. They were unbelievable. But I played for FC Volendam. And at the halfway break of the season, we were tied for first place with Ajax. Tremendous learning experience for me. Just the Dutch way of looking at total football, understanding the how all the pieces really come together. I had never had that kind of perspective on the game. I learned so much from my coach there, and then eventually I went to Spain after the World Cup. And that was a different experience. The coach there was incredibly detail-oriented. And so you got to think about it back then, watching games and all that stuff was a very difficult situation, right? You didn't have it's not games were on every television station, so getting video and all that stuff was difficult. He had this network all over Spain of people that went and watched the games and gave him the scouting reports. And one of the things that we were great on our organization of our team, both offensively, defensively, and set pieces. And we had different set pieces week after week. And we would, honestly, I think we scored probably a set piece goal every week just because of how organized we were. It was almost like trick plays, but the detail was incredible. And I learned a lot from that environment as well. But I also had, in both places, Holland and Spain, I had an incredible experience. And that was, I used to go around, the goalkeeper coach, gosh, why can't I think of his name? The Dutch goalkeeper coach who's been with Louis van Gaal forever, Frans Hoek. Do you know who that is?
Yep.
Okay. So Frans Hoek has been Dutch national team,
everywhere.
Bayern Munich, Barcelona, I mean, you name, he's been everywhere, been World Cup, whatever. So Franz was from Volendam, where I was playing, and he somehow him and I came together because in 1989 I played in the first ever futsal World Cup, and he worked with our team, and the futsal World Cup was in Holland, and I met him there, and that's kind of how I got to Holland. Anyway, I would travel around with him on every Wednesday all over the country of Holland because he would go and train goalkeepers. So he trained Hans van Breukelen of PSV Eindhoven. He trained Stanley Menzo of Ajax. I mean, he trained like all the best keepers. So I would go and I would watch the academies train. I would watch the reserve team train. I would watch the first team train while he was there working with them. So I had great experiences of learning and seeing, trainings and things like that. And when I was in Spain, Barcelona was only an hour drive from me. So I used to go and watch Barcelona train a lot as well. So I had a great experience in those countries.
It's all starting to make sense to me, Pete.
So, hey, a soccer guy, if you're a soccer guy, you know how it is. You're finding ways to better yourself. And it was my way of kind of, getting a chance to understand if I was ever going to move on one day. And I did. I always wanted to coach. I always knew I wanted to coach. Yep. How was I going to, become better? And that was just learning through, things that I had an opportunity to experience, and I had tremendous experiences.
Yeah, that's amazing. So one of the things that I really wanted to talk to you about today is the technical director's role. I know I know you've done that, and you've been successful at it, and now you're overlooking top to bottom at Sporting Kansas City, and that's great. So let me ask you: do you have like an actual methodology that starts at the younger ages and goes all the way to the top, that's progressive in terms of these are the things we're focusing on from 8 to 12 years old, for example, and then 13 to 15. So you have an actual methodology. Can you share a little bit, just give us an outline of what that actually looks like?
Yeah. So first, you kind of, I don't want to say you stole my thunder, but maybe a little bit. And I would say that the first thing I think is, if you're going to be a technical director, what's changed in our game, right? It used to be, if you were on the technical side, if you will, you were just the X's and O's guys out on the field. You were laying cones and you were running training sessions. But that's changed, right? You have to have organizational skills. You have to be able to put your, as you say, your methodology. You have to be able to have a curriculum. You have to be able to then be able to present, right, to other people. So you have to have other skills than just an X's and O's guys. Now, I think it's also obvious that we probably all don't have every one of those skills. So the next thing, to be good in that position, you also have to know where your shortcomings are, and you have to be willing to be open to work on them, but also hire people that maybe are better in those areas than you are, so that they can help you in those areas, as opposed to you saying, no. And this is what happens in our business a lot, right? Guys get a job, they get at the top, and they're afraid to hire anybody good underneath them because they're afraid everybody's going to take their job. So what they do is they hire, and I say it this way, they hire inferior people. And then what happens is they wind up being unsuccessful and they lose their job. My thought has always been this: I am always going to hire smarter and better people than I am, because that's just going to make me stronger all around. I'll also grow because of that. I also think when you hire people, you have to listen to their ideas, to their suggestions, but that doesn't mean that you have to invoke every one of them. Because at the end, if you're the head person, whether the coach, technical director, whatever you want to say, you eventually have to make the decisions that are based on how you think about the game. Because I always think that the head person has the vision. When they have the vision, they know how all the pieces fit together. Somebody else that works with you, they just may know their area and they may know that really well, but they don't necessarily know how it connects with all the other pieces of your club. And so that's why you have to really surround yourself with good people, but at the same time, it gives you the chance to focus on the big picture. So that comes to methodology, the outline. And I think the outline is probably the most important thing. It's hard to say that, hey, I'm going to cookie cutter all the kids and say, hey, from 8 to 10, we're going to do this. 11 to 12, we're going to do this. You can have an outline that establishes things that you want to cover in those areas. But the bottom line is you have to also be able to look at the individual. And so what I would say to you is this: I think when you look at kids that are 15 and under, you should really be allowing them to grow individually. They have to become technically sound. They have to understand, like, both sides of the ball. They have to understand. And I don't mean pressure, cover, balance type. That's concepts.
Right.
I'm talking about they have to know how to defend individually. They have to know how to take somebody on. They have to know how to create a 2 versus 1, like numerical superiority. They have to have things like that they can understand, that are small numbers, but it's more centered around the individual. When you get to 16 and above is where you start really introducing concepts. right? Like, so pressure cover balance, an example. Why are we creating an overlap? What's the reason for it? Because kids don't think about those things, why they do it. Now, kids do it, but the question is, why do they do it? And a lot of times they don't know. They learn it instinctively. Or you find a kid on the street that knows how to do a 2 versus 1 to eliminate a kid, but he doesn't know why he's doing it, right? Eventually, it's good that a kid tries to learn that. Now, it doesn't mean that they all understand that. Like, so I have guys, it's interesting. I've had players in my coaching career where if I take them to a whiteboard with magnets and I show up a situation and I say, what should you do here? Oh, they can move the magnets around and go, oh, this is exactly what you should do. I put them on the field in that situation, they make the wrong decision every time. Something doesn't translate. And so that's why I think that in the early years, and you kind of said it earlier when you talked about the freedom of free play and how does a player, get those skills that are, I always call them tricks of street smarts, right? You want to get street smart for the game. You only learn those things by getting an opportunity to experience those things. And so what happens is that I think there's this over coaching at the younger ages in concepts as opposed to the technical ability that we were talking about. Be a balanced player. Know how to shoot a ball with your left and your right foot. Know how to receive a ball with your left and right foot. Know how to really chip a ball. Know how to hit a ball over distance. I can take kids right now that are 17, 18-year-old kids on the U.S. national team, and I could take them out and say, okay, I'm going to put you guys 50 yards apart. You're going to be on one side of the field and the other, and I want you to just hit balls to each other in the air. Balls everywhere, because they don't work on that technique. I think that's what you need to, I don't want to say perfect because that's not accurate, but you have to become technically proficient 16 or 15 and below, and then that allows you to start learning the concepts because you could actually perform them.
Get it? So just going back to what you said about outline, I like that. So when you've got these younger coaches, we'll go back to 9 to 12 years old, you give them an outline, but then you also give these coaches the freedom to tweak things as they see fit based on their team and the individuals that they've got and so on. And the same with your 13 and 15-year-olds. It's not like cookie cutter, like you said. It's here's the outline. These are the topics we want to cover. Let's give the kids some freedom so they can express themselves. And your primary goal is to make each player better as an individual, correct? Is that what I'm hearing you say?
That's correct. 15 and below, absolutely. It's about the individual for me, for sure. Because if you don't become technically proficient, there's no way to graduate to the next level. You know what I mean? So I can teach a kid all the foundational principles at, say, 12, 13, and 14, but he gets to 15 and he can't receive a ball. Well, then how's he ever going to pass, dribble, or shoot if he can't receive it? You know what I mean?
Right. And then 15 and above, it's psychological and physical and concepts, right? That's where you switch to?
Correct. You start to build that stuff in. And again, I think that you bring up a really good one, the physical as well. The physical starts to become a focus because, we have a saying here in our coaching staff, and that is, the hardest steel has to go through the hottest fire. And so you have to continuously stretch the limits of players. It's amazing that players today, and it has a lot to do with what we said, the structure of things, right? And there's constantly this caution, and there's this viewing of data, which is all really, information is good. There's nothing wrong with having information. It's how you interpret it, right? And how you use it. But there's nothing like saying to a guy, hey, get on the line, and now you're going to run. You're going to run. And the question is that if you go to a guy today and say, hey, an example would be, hey, I want to see how much ground you can cover in 12 minutes. And the guy does it. And I don't know, let's just say he gets, 3.5 miles, right? Well, as we both know, I'm sorry, he gets not 3.5, the guy be flying. Sorry. He gets 1.5 miles, let's say he gets, right? In 12 minutes. And we both know the Cooper test is you should get 2 miles in 12 minutes. Well, when you go back to that guy and now you start to work him and you train him and you show him that next time he goes out that maybe he gets 2 miles, well, he's improved himself. You've shown that he can go beyond the limits that he thought that he had. And I think that's one of the biggest and most important things of a coach is to consistently stretch a player beyond their limits, whether it's technical, tactical, physical, psychological, emotional. that's what your job is to stretch them all the time beyond their limits.
Love that. Love that. So they come in as a 5. Your job is to make them a 6 and then a 7 and then an 8. Just keep going, and it's all individual development. That's awesome. So let me ask you this question. What about dealing with coaches that come in and you have this outline in place? And, you know, when you set out to be a coach, you believe in yourself, and there's a little bit of an ego there because you think you got your methods, right? So yourself at your club, Sporting Kansas, right? You get a coach that applies, he's got a great resume, you give him an outline, and how do you get them all on the same page to align with that outline that you're talking about? What type of psychological tricks are you using as the director?
Yeah, so this is probably the ultimate question, right? Because I always, let's use youth soccer right now. Youth soccer, I think, has 3 buckets of coaches, and I'll go from the bottom up. The first is you just have the guys that are out there to make money, right? They just want to get paid. Bottom line is they need supplemental income, and they played the game, so it's an easy source for them to try and make an income. The second bucket is this group that likes the game, right? Likes the game, is interested in the game, will do some things to better themselves, and obviously need supplemental income. And then you have the top group. The top group is usually the smallest group. They love the game. They will do they'll go to any clinic, they'll go to any coaching license, they'll do anything to improve themselves. And they want to make that their living. Okay? That's the hardest group, in that because there's not a lot of those people in and around your area. It's just the way it always is, right? They're also the most motivated. And so what you're trying to do is you're trying to take those 3 groups and at least trying to get them as close to group number 1 as possible, right? So how do you do it? I think it's a number of things. I think first is you're recruiting. It's okay to have a guy that needs supplemental income. That's great. It's part of this business, right? Well, how do you get him to get closer to group number 1? Well, you got to find what motivates that guy. And if what motivates that guy is actually income, then make him incentive-based in your club, right?
Yeah.
So, hey, if you get your A license, you're going to step up in how we pay you. So there's different ways of motivating people. That's one. The other is, I think that what you can't do is I can't give you, say, this outline, whether I send it to you via email or I give it to you on paper or a manual or whatever, and then I just wipe my hands clean. I have to constantly have a connection with you. And how I have a connection with you is that I have scheduled educational dates with all of my coaches throughout the course of a year. And so that keeps them connected to know that I'm giving them the things that I want to make sure that are still being emphasized within our club. And at the same time, it gives me a connection point with them for them to know that, hey, I'm keeping an eye on you. And then the other is showing up, is getting out there and watching the coaches, see what they do, and then meeting back with them at some point on it. It doesn't have to be on the field. You can take them out for a cup of coffee. There's different things that you can do like that to keep those touch points that also make sure that they also know that, hey, I'm watching. And I don't think that a little bit of fear is a bad thing sometimes. From their boss. I think this is actually a good thing sometimes.
That's awesome. So last question. I love the content that you're giving us here. That's fantastic. So what advice would you have for an aspiring technical director? Walking in, my first day on the job, I'm about to get out of my car. I got this job. I've gone from coach to technical director. Bit of advice.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what I did. I took over a club here in 2003. Yeah, 2003. And it was amazing. They just finished their tryouts. Okay. So I decided I was going to use the first year as I was going to shut my mouth, and I was going to go and I was basically going to do almost like as if I was doing a research paper about the club. And I went, and anybody who worked for the club in any capacity, administrators, guys that did stuff on the recreational program, competitive program, I just went and I just basically interviewed them probably over 8 months. And over that 8 months, I basically formulated my plan from all the knowledge that I got from them. And it took me a full year of being there to then formulate that plan, present it to the board, and then implement it at the next tryouts is when all of it was introduced. And the introduction of that was, I put myself on the firing lines. I went and I had 5 PowerPoint presentations that I provided to all of the families of the club. I presented everything from our methodology, what our curriculum was going to be, how the teams would play, what the financial expectations were. I did it all. And I did 5 because in case you couldn't make one as a family or whatever, so there was different ones to pick. And there were times when I had over 1,000 people at them, and I took questions. And so I think communication is a big piece, but I think in the early stages, you have to listen. Now, when you get all that done, this is now the big piece. Is I think what happens to a lot of guys, and this happens at my level, even with owners. Okay, it's the same exact thing. I think of owners as the board of directors in a youth club that's a 501c3, right? You have your board of directors. And the problem there is that most of them don't have a lot of knowledge about soccer. What they do have knowledge about is business. And so you now get into this position is that you got to go and report to them. You got to ask them for things. And then they look at you and they're like, well, my son, he plays on this team, and you got to make sure that I want my son to stay on this team, even though he's not good enough. I'm sorry, but on day one, you have to decide what kind of technical director are you going to be, and what kind of club do you want to have? If you want to have it based on, if you have a tiered system and you're good enough to be on team 1, then you're on team 1. If you're on team 2, you're on team 2. I don't care whose kid it is, whether it's yours, whether it's another coach in your club, or whether it's a board of director. You have to establish that from day one, and you have to stick to those basic foundational principles. If you do that, you have a chance. If you don't, you'll always be reactionary in your job. And I think that's a big, big mistake that a lot of guys do, a lot of people do in the business. And I would finish by saying this. We talked about, I mentioned communication. Communication is doing things and communicating when you don't necessarily want to. So my example would be is going and meeting with a board member, explaining to them what you are thinking, as opposed to just going and doing it and then assuming that now everybody's going to be on board with you, as opposed to showing them the respect that, hey, this is what I want to do. I just want to kind of let you know, here's how I'm going to go do it. This is what I'm thinking. How do I bring them into the fold to be supportive of me, as opposed to going and doing something on my own, not telling anybody, and immediately it's just a conflict. Whether I did something good or bad for the club, it doesn't matter at that point. It's just a conflict because I didn't play the game that you have to sometimes. And the game is you have to go and show the respect to those people that are running the club. And if you do it in the right way, you actually get them on your side, and you actually have an easier time of it than having to now fight everybody on every single thing that you want to do.
Love that. Love that. Well, Pete, listen, man, I know that we could talk for days, without a doubt. I appreciate you hopping on. Your knowledge is first class. I'm sure that everybody in New Jersey is going to love listening to this one, especially the coaches. Thanks for hopping on. Much respect. As I said, keep up the great work, and I hope to meet you face to face sometime.
My pleasure. And as well, we get out of this COVID thing, maybe I'll see you when I come to play Philly or the Red Bulls.
Yeah, I'll get in contact with you. Okay.
Okay. Great, James. Thank you very much. All the best.
See you, man.
Take care.